Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining the session in partnership with the Hackett Group. Today, we're going to learn more about some key procurement issues that you can expect to see in 2026. So I'm excited to talk to you about HICX and supplier management and hear from the Hackett Group today. My name is Jeremy Reeves. I lead our product team here at HICX. I've been in the procurement software industry for 20 plus years. I've done product management and sourcing and contract management, and my favorite, supplier management. Today, I'm joined by Kurt Albertson from the Hackett Group. Kurt, I know you're going to go deeper into your expertise. Do you want to say hi to everyone?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jeremy. Look forward to sharing the Hackett Group's 2026 procurement key issues study with you all. It is hot off the press. Some good stuff in there, so look forward to it. Thank you for the opportunity.
Awesome, thanks. So, the next hour is going to be mainly spent with the Hackett Group study results. But before we dive in, I wanted to spend some time giving you a quick introduction to HICX. A little bit about what HICX has been experiencing in the market over the past year in 2025. And then we're going to spend some time on the study where this is where Kurt will be presenting a lot of the great information. And then we'll save some time for Q&A. If you do have questions throughout the session, please put them in the chat. Those are going to be private questions, so nobody else can see them except for us on the panel. And we will go ahead and try to answer them at the end, but feel free to just start typing them throughout the session. So first, for those of you who are new to HICX, let me set the stage. So HICX is not just another supplier management tool. We're a solution that transforms the way global enterprises work with their suppliers. We drive efficiency, unlock insights, and dramatically improve the business impact that you can have. Think of our supplier management platform as the core backbone for all of your suppliers. Every workflow, every piece of data, every interaction across your function flows through one unified system. And what makes us truly unique is the combination that you see here. We have deep supplier domain expertise, world-class master data management, and the ability to create custom workflows for your internal users and suppliers quickly. Most companies might have one of these, maybe two if they're lucky, but all three together, that's the HICX advantage. This means faster time to value, means unparalleled data quality and governance, and it means the flexibility to orchestrate your processes at the pace that your businesses need without being held back by legacy systems. So HICX customers are some of the largest and best known brands, as you can see here. We're honored to be able to deliver some stellar results for these companies. We have a long and successful history in supporting these organizations across a variety of sectors, including food and beverage, aerospace and defense, automotive, manufacturing, energy, and consumer products. We're extremely proud of our results and what the HICX customers have been able to achieve. For example, at Mondelez, they've reduced time by 86% using the HICX platform. BAE, they've unified their supplier management system across 20 ERPs. And for those of you who know, that's not an easy feat to overcome. And at AutoNation, they've cut supplier administration costs by 70%. We're keen to deliver similar results to all of those of you out there, and feel free to reach out to us to learn more. So, before we dive into the main content today, I just wanted to take a quick look at what's been happening in 2025. So From a HICX perspective, when we look back at our analysis from last year, we saw something really striking emerging across the procurement landscape. We used AI to analyze tons of conversations from our customers, and I think it's over 100 different companies that we had been talking to throughout 2025, and we used AI to analyze that. And this is what you're kind of seeing here on the slide. We're learning that our customers were being asked to do more than ever before. Cost pressures are intensifying. Supplier resilience has gone to the top of the agenda, and sustainability expectations continue to rise. Demands keep escalating. More and more is being asked from procurement teams, from supplier management teams. And Kurt's going to talk more about this later on. But at the same time, those foundations needed to meet those expectations have continued to be shaky. Organizations still have multiple ERP systems, disconnected applications. Supplier-facing systems are fragmented. You have multiple systems that suppliers are having to interact with. Processes are manual, always slow, and supplier data governance is just not strong enough to support the scale and complexity of companies today. So you've had this huge push for modernization and resilience built on top of an infrastructure that wasn't ready for it. And, procurement teams are feeling stretched. Time, budget, and energy is being drained by many different activities. The good news is this entire paradox is solvable. So with that, I'm pleased to hand it over to Kurt to look into 2026 and take us through the procurement key issue results. Kurt, over to you.
Great. Thanks, Jeremy. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, loud and clear.
All right, fantastic. Well, great introduction. And, a lot of the things, particularly on that last slide that you covered, I'll really bring to light as we kind of look into this year, the coming year, about where kind of the minds of procurement leadership is focused, right? And what issues are they faced with? And a lot of the things you talked about, cost savings, resiliency, getting, kind of speed, more responsiveness, getting out of manual processes, implementing technology to solve a lot of these problems. That is front and center in the 2026 procurement agenda and key issues. So look forward to jumping into this. Without further ado, let me just do a quick introduction of who I am so you know the Hackett Group and where this information kind of comes from. I think that's helpful. I'm a principal in our procurement advisory practice. So I run our North American practice in that space. We have a couple hundred clients that participate in these advisory programs. Large, typically multinational, but not all, global companies. And we work with them in the transformation of their procurement functions, right? And I've been at Hackett for 20 years, worked as a consultant for 7 years at another firm, and then grew up in the manufacturing environment up in Detroit. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. But if you don't know Hackett, we're a very empirically based organization. We collect a lot of information, use that information to really drive fact-based discussions with our client base. And one of the areas that we kind of really lean into is this procurement key issues study. We actually executed kind of heading in at the end of last year. So each year we've been doing this as long as I've been at Hackett. We look forward into the coming year and ask procurement leadership, what's on your mind? What are your priorities? Where will you make investments? What are the things that are really going to impact you as an organization? And it is one of our signature studies that we put out. And, we tend to drive a lot of discussions in the market and a lot of discussions with our clients through conversations around this IP. I'm not including all of the content here today, but we'll get through most of it. But where we kind of start, and again, we do this at a broader level, we do it at an enterprise level, and then we drill down into the specific functions like procurement, finance, HR, so on and so forth. Today, obviously, we'll be going over the procurement version of this. So starting kind of more holistically at the company-wide level, thinking about, the backdrop of the environment that we are working in as procurement professionals. I don't think any of this comes as a surprise, right? Some of the major issues and risks associated with the enterprise are, continue to be things around cybersecurity attacks, cybersecurity risk. Not surprising, the trade wars are a concern. Those were escalated again this last week. Ongoing activity, you'll see that as kind of a common thread throughout the key issues study, the impacts of that when it comes to procurement. Number 3, the economic downturn and or recession, right? In speaking with clients and the study results, companies with a lot of the, what we call, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, VOCU in the market, it causes a lot of uncertainty and fears with respect to the economy. And then finally, number 4, the impact of AI-enabled technology at the enterprise level. And obviously, that's going to be kind of a common theme as we talk about procurement and the impact that AI is going to have on transformation within the procurement organization. You certainly see some of the other areas. Regulatory compliance obviously is a big concern, particularly in Europe. So on geopolitical tension. And I will highlight, because I think it's worth noting, and it kind of sticks out. It's at the bottom just in terms of how we organize this. We started with kind of major concerns, but the access to skilled talent. And you see 57% of companies said it's a moderate concern. Tie that to this AI journey that the enterprise and procurement is on. And I'm going to have a conversation about that. But those two are very much tied together. So if we could kick off the first poll we've got, Dan, that would be great. Is that something we can do? Can we kick off the poll? Is that possible? All right, I'm going to go ahead and just
Yeah, it's
move
going.
on. But
it's going, Kurt. The polls.
Oh, it is. Okay, I just can't see it then. Okay.
Yeah, it's I can help for you. It's yeah, we've got 5 answers so far, 9 answers, and right now AI-enabled digital transformation is leading, and it should be on the right hand side of your screen there.
I got it now. I got it now. I had to unmaximize my screen, but I can see it now. Thanks, Jeremy. Yeah. So, the question is, which key issue? So the ones I'm showing you right now are at the enterprise level. Which key issues will have the greatest transformational impact on how procurement performs its job over the next 5 years? So certainly AI seems to be the front runner. I don't even think it's close at this point. So we can go ahead and end that poll. But thank you for that input. So from a procurement perspective, I think most of you are saying AI is going to be pretty impactful. Let's take a look and see what the study says. Not surprising. Like many of you, AI is certainly front and center when we ask the question more specific to procurement, right? This is looking at the top 10 procurement trends with a transformational impact, just like the poll. In this case, when we asked it, they could pick multiple options. So, but just like the poll, AI-enabled technology is front and center by a long shot, right? And interesting enough, digital procurement and automation kind of comes in number 2. I don't think next year when we ask this question, we'll even ask those as separate questions, right? I mean, AI-enabled digital transformation is kind of becoming the norm, right? You really can't take on digital procurement automation without addressing the AI aspect of it. So those two are very, very much kind of hand in hand. I mentioned kind of at the slide before this idea of skill sets. Before this session, I was actually on a session driving a AI and procurement training or learning session for one of my clients, all around prompt engineering and agentic AI, right? There were, several hundred people on, very large global company. And it was around AI learning session for procurement folks. Look, there's a reason changing profile procurement skills is number 3. This goes hand in hand, as I already mentioned, with this AI-enabled digital transformation. If you look at the number 4 spot, procurement transformation, that also is very much tied to this AI journey. What I'll say is, in the past, and digital transformation has obviously been a hot theme for many years. It's not new, but the impact it had on the organization was to drive efficiencies, and to some extent, free up time of our strategic resources. But we really saw the technology for labor swap really in the operational side of procurement. Our perspective on AI and the impact it's going to have on procurement's operating model is that it's going to be very significant, right? This idea of procurement transformation is really going to be targeted towards transforming what up until now has kind of been a fairly static operating model in procurement. The roles we had 20 years ago are the same roles we have today. We think that's going to change, being driven by this AI-enabled technology and agentic AI. And so those top 4 certainly go hand in hand, right? And then number 5, broadening the scope of procurement's responsibilities. Look, this is how we remain relevant as a procurement organization, right? Becoming closer with our stakeholders, the trusted advisor that you've all heard about, taking on more responsibility, being closer and more influential with our stakeholder community. It's really about, that's where we have the biggest impact as an organization. So you look at those top 5 and they really go hand in hand. The AI-enabled digital transformation, driving changes in the operating model of procurement, new skill sets, new roles, allowing us to do more impactful things with our internal stakeholders, including things like supplier management, internal stakeholder management. I mean, you think about, supplier management, right? And it's, obviously we've heard that term. That term has been around for a while, but it's always an immature capability within our clients. Always. Everybody says it's really important, but it's always something that doesn't get the attention that it needs. So, that's an example of kind of where we can kind of evolve as a procurement function and really address some of those things that can have a significant impact on our key objectives of resiliency and cost reduction. Interesting enough, you see the star on AI at the top and some of the others as well, and particularly deep real-time data and insights and visibility. Those two kind of go hand in hand today, insights, data, and you'll see that as a common theme as we continue on here in AI. Data is critical. The star means that while everyone says these are important, they also said we have very low level of preparedness in those areas. So 2 of these key areas, deep real-time data and insights and AI, we're saying are important, particularly the AI element, but we're really not as prepared as we need to be as an organization. That's the storyline there. All right. So thank you all for participating in that poll as well. Continuing on. So, this is an interesting slide, and I'm going to spend a little time on it, right? It's a slide we've been, in some version of this, we've been doing for a while, right? So we can kind of go back and look at history. And what I'm showing there with the little arrows is just the 3-year trend of how each of these numbers have changed. And this idea of workload, right? Procurement workload. You ask procurement professionals, most people say, yeah, I'm so busy right now. there's two things driving that. You think about, a lot of the M&A activity accelerated in 2025. It's supposed to be pretty high in 2026 at the same levels at least. Look, we're taking on more spend. We're taking on more activity just in terms of some of the acquisitions that are being done. But the other aspect of that total workload volume increase of 8% really has to do with the additional responsibilities we have as an organization. Part of that is a bigger focus on risk, this volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity that is ever present now in our environment, managing through that, a lot of the ESG stuff, supplier management, all of that stuff, the inflationary activities we had to manage through here recently. A lot of that is just adding to procurement's workload. And every year we kind of see that go up. You see 8% is about where it's been about the last 3 years in terms of how much do we feel like we're taking on. Where you don't see increases, however, and they've actually been slightly negative, been trending down over the last 3 years, is in that addition of staff and operating budget, right? We're not adding staff to address that added workload. So obviously you see the answer there, plain as day. Procurement technology spend of increase in just over 6% from 2025 to 2026 is the expectation. And that is an increase over the last couple of years as well. It continues to increase. So the technology for labor swap is in full effect. And I would argue with the AI-enabled digital transformation is only accelerating. So I would expect these trends to not only continue, but probably to accelerate. All right. So top 10 priorities, right? This is kind of the key slide that we tend to drive a lot of discussions with our clients. This slide is basically answering the question of, if you ask procurement leadership, what are your top 10 priorities? And it's a little more complex in terms of kind of how we rank these, right? There's actually kind of two questions. We first ask, what are your top 10 priorities? And then we ask, how do you kind of prioritize those? So there's two kind of questions coming together here. But in general, this answers that question of procurement leadership. What are the top 10 priorities you have heading into 2026? Look, number 1 and 2 shouldn't be a surprise, right? Improved spend cost reduction is always up there. That's table stakes to what we do as a procurement function. That's not changing. It's usually 1, sometimes 2. I think, last few years, I think it actually got relegated down to 3 with the inflationary environment and, supply shortages, but it's back into number 2. I think we were a little surprised to see ensure supply continuity. And Jeremy, you mentioned this, managing scarcity and continuity in the slides you've shown. But when we have I was a little surprised to still see that so high. I expected it to drop a little bit. But look, it's the trade wars. Companies are looking at their supply chains and reconfiguring their supply chains, with the trade wars, the tariffs that are going on, right? Building redundancy into their supply chains, because in the volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity world we live in, that flexibility is needed. So that's really what's driving it. And it's not across the entire market. There are a distinct set or segment of companies that are driving that in terms of ensure supply continuity still being number 1. But it's just to give you an idea, before the pandemic, coming out of the pandemic, supply continuity was never in the top 10. It has, and we'll look at this in a second, it has consistently been up there in the top 3 or 4 since, kind of post-pandemic. I think some companies got caught a little bit not building capability to understand risk and manage risk of their supply base. And now what we've seen is investment in kind of managing supply continuity. And that requires data, right? You look over there at number 9, improve analytics and insights capabilities. It's a top 10 priority. You'll see as an initiative, it's actually significantly higher than that. We'll take a look at that. But it really is this two-headed dragon of ensuring supply and driving cost reduction. And then you see this idea of deploying AI-enabled technology as the number 3 priority for procurement. So it is a top 3 priority. Again, back to the conversation we were having on the previous slide, what that's going to drive is a transformation in the operating model. It's going to allow us to act more as that strategic advisor. Starting to look over at the right-hand side, it's going to help us manage third-party risk management better, improve agility, improve the velocity, our responsiveness of the organization. So these are all kind of very much intertwined, but it starts with supply risk, third-party risk, cost reduction, deploying AI technology. That's going to drive transformation of our operating model, hopefully allow us to be more influential, more a strategic advisor to the business and our internal stakeholders, and implement more complex category strategies that move the needle on number 1 and number 2. So that's kind of what the highlights are. Now, I will make a couple of comments. We do look at this data from a couple of other angles, right? We look at it from North America versus Europe versus Asia Pacific. We look at it more from a service versus a manufacturing-based organizations. And there are distinct differences that I'm not going to get into, but certainly depending on your geographic footprint and whether you're more a service delivery organization or more of a manufacturing organization, you are going to prioritize these a little bit differently.
Hey, Kurt, can you, one question came in, which was, can you talk more about transform the operating model and what does it actually mean? What do you mean by that when you say that?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we actually just did a webcast on this yesterday that I attended. But certainly when we think about transforming the operating model, what we're saying there is, and it goes to what I was saying before, right? And we have a slide that says there are really kind of four key components of a procurement organizational structure, right? The first one is spend management, and that's category management, strategic sourcing, supplier management. If you're involved in new product development activities, that is the core focus of procurement in our mind. That area right there. You also have a stakeholder engagement pillar within that design, right? Which is very stakeholder focused in terms of engaging our internal stakeholders and influencing our stakeholders as a strategic advisor. Particularly on the indirect side, we all know procurement is an influence model in most organizations, right? So think about that stakeholder management piece becoming, in terms of transforming the operating model, becoming significantly more important in a transformed operating model. More people, more resources going into that in terms of engaging and being engaged with our internal stakeholders in the businesses, focusing on our core competency of spend management, SRM, new product development, that's part of what we're doing. And then supported by an enablement group or a center of excellence that is focused on, to a large part, our digital enablement, our digital strategy, as well as other things, analytics, that type of stuff. And then a fourth component, which more and more activity is getting driven to, which is more of a support function, a corporate function, a GBS, shared service type environment that is taking over some of the things that we as a procurement function do today. Look at tail spend management, for example. No reason in the future operating model that should be managed by procurement. It's either going to be automated through some type of AI solution or supported by kind of a support function within the organization. So to put it more simply, if you look at the resourcing and you divide the resources between kind of operational and strategic, the operational resources will continue to get leaned out of the procurement function. The strategic resources, however, will shift in terms of their deployment to being much, much closer to our internal stakeholders. And then we will use the rest of the organization to support what we are trying to accomplish. So hopefully that helps a little bit. But it's about new roles and new skills as well, right? Which is what I kind of hinted at earlier. All right. So, and I think the best example, just to summarize it, is you think about tail spend. Procurement either doesn't bother with it or they're involved in it and it takes up all their time. They don't really want to be involved in it, but it needs to be managed. There are AI solutions out there to manage that and or support functions outside of procurement to kind of take that off our hands, as an example. Good question, though. So looking at from a trend perspective, right? Because I know it's, we're looking at it static. I've talked about some of the things that have shifted. I mentioned, supply continuity has been kind of a top priority for the last, coming out of the post-pandemic. It didn't exist kind of pre-pandemic. Not that it wasn't important. It was always just table stakes, but it never rose to being a huge priority because it was always managed to a large degree. But for the last 5 years, it's been top two. Improving cost reduction, that's always been up there. Transforming the operating model, the one we just talked about, that has never been, I don't think it's ever even been in the top 10. In 2024, we saw it jump into the top 5. And that's, we saw it at number 3 and now number 4. So it's becoming more emphasis. So again, our projection is that when you think about the impact of AI-enabled technology, whereas in the past, it was really about efficiency, leaning out the operational side, the operating model in terms of roles and what people do and the skills they need will look dramatically different 3, 4, 5 years from now due to the advent of the AI-enabled technology and the rolling out of that. All right, can we launch the next poll too? I think we got one more poll here. And now I know how to look at these, so that's helpful. All right, next poll. So if you think about the priorities we just talked about, what is the most critical improvement initiatives being undertaken to achieve procurement's top priorities? So, what's the transformational initiatives that we're actually investing in, dedicating resources to achieve those sets of priorities? Data analytics and reporting, AI-enabled digital transformation, category management, strategic sourcing, talent development. I'll give you a few more seconds there. Data analytics, AI-enabled digital transformation, category management, sourcing, talent development. And we were limited to 5 options here. So a bit of a cut down menu, but it's looking like the front runner again is AI-enabled digital transformation, followed by talent, kind of following the lines I've talked about. Those kind of tend to be the front runners. We'll give that another second. Going once, going twice. All right. So thank you all for that. Let me go ahead and get rid of that. It looks like AI is once again the leader there. Let's show the results, right? So this was from the key issue study. Top 10 improvement initiatives as defined as the percentage of companies that said we have an active initiative in this area as part of our transformation program. First is actually data analytics and reporting, followed by AI-enabled technology. So, the poll was, just slightly off, but not far, right? Those two are at the top. And again, in my mind, AI requires data, right? We need good supplier information, supplier data. We are becoming such a significantly more data-intensive organization in procurement compared to what we were just 5-10 years ago. And a lot of that was driven, frankly, by, kind of post-pandemic, wanting better visibility to risk and asking the question, do we really understand our risk across our suppliers? With the volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity world we live in, the VUCA world, I guess is what it's called, getting better visibility to what's happening in supply markets and pricing, all of that is becoming ultra critical. The regulatory stuff around sustainability and ESG, broader ESG, particularly in Europe, that has become critical, right? We need access to better supply information to manage risks, to address ESG issues, to identify cost savings opportunities, so on and so forth, right? It is becoming table stakes to procurement. Data analytics and reporting was number one last year as well. And then AI, right? AI relies on good data, right? You know, it's we need to have good information to really glean out and be productive with respect to our AI technologies. So it's no surprise to me that those are kind of 1 and 2. And 1 and 2 are obviously going to drive our core processes of category management, strategic sourcing, supplier relationship management. You know, kind of the one we always hear is really important, but we're still very immature at it across most organizations. We got to get better at kind of managing our suppliers. And then talent, right? Talent's number 5, right? Because of what the drivers I've already talked about. Again, certainly this slide looks a little different if you look at it from Europe versus North America, manufacturing versus service, but a lot of the core things I just talked about are the same. So again, think of this slide as the initiatives focused on to achieve those objectives. This is the same data, just kind of arranged. It's a broader set, obviously, of initiatives, and it's arranged a little differently, right? It shows X to Y axis importance. So things to the right tend to be the most important. Things at the top tend to be more mature than the things at the bottom. You see SRM I talked about in that critical development area, not that mature, as I mentioned. And then the size of the circle is what we were representing on the last slide. It's the percentage of organizations that have improvement initiatives underway. Look, the reason I usually don't show this slide year to year, I usually just use the one I just showed, but the dimension I wanted to capture with this slide is I added AI-enabled technology. You see AI-enabled technology for 2026 in the bottom right-hand corner. It's one of the biggest circles right behind, right behind the data analytics and reporting, as we just saw. It has approximately tripled in size from last year. The other thing, it has moved from mid-importance all the way to the right, the most important initiative that procurement executives they have underway. That is a huge change year over year. We've been doing this study as long as I've been at Hackett, 21 years, never seen an initiative even come close to moving that quickly. So those folks, that still aren't on board of this AI train, just based on this one slide alone, again, we think, 2024, people were kind of talking about it, trying to really understand it. 2025, we saw some movement. 2026 is where we really see a lot of companies move forward in procurement and elsewhere with their AI agenda. And we're starting to see it already. The other one I mentioned on here is third-party risk management. This has been a big focus for a while. You see I showed 2025 to where it is today up in the upper right-hand corner. More companies kind of view this as a more maturing organization, particularly over the last year. You did see it kind of mature quite a bit, kind of not as certainly a significant amount, but going up the ladder in terms of maturity, which is a good thing, right? We've seen a lot of focus on better management of risk related to suppliers. And again, that requires good data and information. So
I love this slide, Kurt, by the way. I love this slide because this is exactly what HICX is doing. So I'm so glad you're showing it.
Yeah, and if you think about, HICX and what you all do, right? Supplier information, supplier management, you see kind of bits and pieces of that, right? Supplier performance management, supplier relationship management, risk, kind of all over the place, right? But it's an area that still has a lot of opportunity, particularly when we look at SRM, supplier performance management, master data. All of those are, those three are kind of still down in that critical development area. It's an area that companies feel the pain of, right? And, and this isn't new, right? Rewind this conversation 5-6 years ago, master data, supply data is a big problem. And our argument, it's becoming much, much more critical in this in this VOCU world, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, risk, and a world that's going to be leveraging AI to a higher degree.
Yeah.
You need better data. All right, continuing on here. Interesting. This slide is it's worth including, right? Because this is core to what procurement does: cost reduction, cost avoidance. Just giving you a perspective of kind of heading in, what we showed for the 2025 study and 2026 study. Our projections for savings increasing, staying the same, or decreasing, right? And companies are getting a little more conservative in terms of their projections, but not significantly, right? So if you look at, last study, 48% said, we expect to increase. This year it was only 45. 31% said we're going to stay flat. This year it was 35 on the cost reduction side. So, not as big on the cost avoidance side. I think, it was a little bit more stark. And I think some of that has to do with the decrease in the inflationary environment. I will make a comment. When you look at this, interesting enough, when you look at this from a North America versus European perspective, in North America, companies are actually telling us that they're getting more, they're expecting to drive more savings, actually. And Europe has gotten much, much more conservative. So kind of an interesting paradox there between the two geographies and looking at this data. I could pontificate about some of the reasons why that might be. Bigger focus on regulatory over in Europe right now, as an example. But some of this is just kind of my speculating. Probably not worth talking about right now. We don't have the time either. So, all right, let's switch gears. I've got about 7 minutes left. Let's talk about technology, right? Cornerstone to, what we're here today to talk about, the digital transformation journey, the key issue study. This is how Hackett kind of views the world of the source to pay ecosystem. There's this core end-to-end technology, upstream, downstream, purchase to pay versus spend analytics, sourcing, CLM, supplier lifecycle management. There are supporting procurement technologies, think intake orchestration, tail spend management, sustainability solutions, so on and so forth. And then what we call AI-enabled technologies, or a lot of times we use the phrase intelligent or intelligent automation solutions at the bottom. So let me just kind of go through here and share some highlights about each of these three rungs. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on some of these. These are pretty complex slides, but they're data loaded. I love these slides, but I got to kind of pick and choose my storylines here. So if you look at the core technology, a couple of things to point out. Supplier lifecycle management. We've kind of hinted on this, talked about it. You see the biggest percentage on this slide, 43%, are kind of piloting technologies there. Not a huge large scale deployment of SLM type solutions. Why is that? Well, it's a fragmented, and frankly, a lot of companies try to use kind of, their suite solutions or ERPs, and those solutions just don't cut it, right? So you've got some pilot solutions in here, which really represents kind of companies going out and using best-in-class point solutions to solve some of the issues in supplier lifecycle management. The other thing I'll talk about is spend analytics, right? We talked about the importance, the top one, the importance of data analytics. And you see significant investment in upgrading existing technology there. 2/3 says they are upgrading their spend analytics technology. So that is a big place of investment. CLM, interesting area. If you look at any of the core functionality, it historically, and this year, is the area where business objective realization falls most short of any kind of core functionality. Over half said we didn't get the benefit we expected. It's also an area, 33% said we're investing in new technology. This is an area that is being impacted by the AI quite a bit, and there's some pretty exciting stuff going on there and some of the best-in-class AI-based type solutions that are out there. You also see it on the supplier lifecycle management phase, right? About a quarter, just over a quarter, are investing in new technology. Think best-in-class point solutions to solve this problem, as opposed to ERP and suite solutions like HICX, for example. So Just some highlights there on the core technology. The second layer, the what we call the supporting procurement technologies. Look, if you look at where the investment is going, it's in advanced analytics, a la the spend analytics I already talked about, supply risk management, and supplier performance management. So again, highlighting a lot of the investment in supplier management types of activities. Supplier performance management is one of those areas that historically has been a tough area to really ultimately drive the value that companies really wanted. You see 41% say we didn't get the business value. And then intake orchestration solutions, right? So the intaking of requests, the orchestration of activity, either across the full source to settle spot, or kind of the onboarding process as an example. So orchestrating, using technology to orchestrate that process. A lot of investment in new technologies in that area. But I highlighted some of the broader, you think about supplier collaboration, supplier performance management, supplier risk. A lot of these areas tend to be the whole I'll put it in a big bucket of SRM, supplier lifecycle management. These tend to be areas where we see companies struggle to gain value trying to use ERP suite solutions, and they tend to kind of start to focus on best-in-class type point solutions. And then finally, the AI-enabled technologies, right? And there's a broad set of different types of technologies we look at. Some of these, computer vision, for example, I'm not even that up to date on. I understand what it is, but it's really the generative AI and the agentic AI solutions that are getting most of the attention and most of the investment. Predictive AI, to a certain extent, and that's kind of been around for a while, but it really is those top two where we are seeing the biggest piloting and the biggest investment in new technologies. Again, investing in upgrading existing technology versus investing in new technology. The way you can think of that is, okay, we've got our existing technology architecture. Are we just kind of upgrading that to kind of get this functionality, or are we going out and looking for a different solution, best-in-class point solution, or other type of activity? But that's where, out of any of this functionality we've talked about in these last three slides, it is generative AI and the agentic AI that is, where we are seeing the most amount of companies saying we are investing in new technology. Love this slide. I know it's complicated, but we always get the question. We always, this is an interesting question. If you had asked me, 5 years ago compared to now, companies always said, hey, Kurt, what should we do with our technology strategies? How much should we leverage our existing ERP versus kind of an end-to-end suite solution? Think, a suite that does everything. If you look at that first slide I showed you on technology, everything from, upstream and downstream, it does it all, versus kind of, I'm going to go out and get best-in-class functionality in a specific area or areas, and not leverage the ERP or suite to do that. 5-6 years ago, the tendency was, no, we want a suite. We really want to leverage suite type approach. That has shifted. We are seeing more organizations kind of saying, you know what, with some of the ability now we have to kind of link stuff together, different, best-in-class point solutions. From an integration perspective, it has become easier to do that. There are more organizations now that are kind of saying, you know what, we maybe went down the suite solution, didn't get the functionality that we needed. We really want to go out and focus on point solutions, best-in-class solutions across these particular areas. And you see a lot of those areas. I've highlighted them. The darker the blue tends to be the higher percentage of companies that are saying that's their strategy there. So that, I love this slide because it does help answer that question, and we have seen a shift there, right? So, something like CLM, for example, most companies have the, 54%, e-sourcing, 54% have gone with suite solutions in the past. We look at CLM, we're seeing a much broader blend of suite and point solutions as an example. And particularly in the supplier lifecycle management piece, if you kind of go through here, you find a much broader blend of strategies across all three applications. All right, so let me just kind of finish out here on AI because I know I'm running a little bit long. Look, about 43% of companies coming into this year said they had something in play on the AI technology adoption. Another 45% are going to have something in place in 2026. Very few, less than 10, don't think they'll have something coming into play. So this is evolving quite rapidly. This slide just gives you an idea of where AI-enabled technology is being deployed. Think about the things at the top. Think about a race, right? The farther the darker blue line is to the left, the more it's being implemented, piloted, or investigated. Things like contract management, market intelligence and price comparison, spend analytics, customer support, the purchasing process, intake management are some of the hot areas. But we're also seeing, if you kind of look through here, supply risk as well. Some of those areas, supply management, certainly opportunities there as well. So that's the answer. That's the question this slide answers. And then I'll kind of leave it at this slide here because I know we're kind of running out of time. But there's this idea of value realization, right? And we put out research probably 3 or 4 years ago now that said, AI can drive 45% efficiencies across G&A, including procurement. We didn't necessarily say those resources were going to go to the bottom line. This is kind of an updated AI-enabled technology value realization, what our clients are telling us, and it's kind of stacked from the top ones are the biggest value that's been realized. Interesting enough, if you kind of look at those top 4, it's about cycle time reduction, productivity increases, effectiveness and quality improvements, think better risk management. It's about customer or employee experience improvements. Those are kind of the top 4 value realizations right now coming to fruition when we ask companies, what have you achieved here? FTE reductions, operating cost reductions, those are kind of towards the bottom. Now, will that change? To some degree, probably a little bit. But again, it really kind of does kind of drive home this theme that, AI may not replace everybody in procurement. It's just going to augment a lot of what they do and allow us to be much more effective and be closer to our internal stakeholders. All right, so I'll leave it at that. And I think we can see if there are any Q&A right now at this point. We can respond to anything we haven't gotten a chance to respond to.
Yeah, we have a question that I've been saving. So I'll ask it in just 1 second, but I'll open it up to questions. If you have questions, please put them in the chat and we'll get to them here in the last 5 minutes. Kurt, just one point while people are generating any additional questions. Computer vision, I love that one. I think it's one of probably the most underestimated items there on the table. I'm using it every day, even for this presentation. I was using it. You can now take a screenshot and upload it to these AIs, and it's able to read that information on that screenshot and analyze it and give you insights. So you could literally take this, for example, this slide, and have AI give it to you. So this is where computer vision is. It's looking at either it's camera images of any sort, and interpreting to them. And I think this is going to change the way fundamentally people use software in the future. But that said, the first item that was asked was, any insights that you have on failures in supplier performance management across, the organizations that you hear? I have an input. I have some takes from my side, but I'd love to hear your point of view on this. Is why are organizations failing as it relates to SPM?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult, right? It's a difficult process to get the information and the data, right? And frankly, a lot of procurement professionals are there is this kind of old adage of procurement that we negotiate the contracts and then, hey, good luck with those contracts, right? Supplier performance is a stakeholder problem, not a procurement problem. So part of it is that, right? There are still our organizations that don't look at the whole life cycle of, from source to contract to ongoing supplier management activities. They just don't look at it as part of their kind of, that we don't have time to do it. And again, what I talked about, right? Hopefully, as part of the operating model change, hopefully, by eliminating some of the stuff that, some have called it kind of computer time through AI enabled technologies, we can focus on that, right? And that's really going to add value to our stakeholders, because we get the question all the time, hey, our stakeholders want us to manage the performance of suppliers. We don't have the bandwidth to do that. Hackett, what do you recommend? I mean, is it our problem, or is it really the stakeholders' problem? And ultimately, it would be nice if a lot of procurement organizations were much more involved. I mean, certainly on your core direct materials, generally you've got some focus there, but across the broader supply base, it's usually not. And the data is not easy to kind of come by and get and make sure you've got good data to support that. Those are my thoughts.
Great answer. No, that's a great answer. I agree with everything you said. And if you take it a level deeper, one of the things that I've experienced is that a lot of companies try to solve it for the entire company and try to merge all this, and they've made the problem so much harder to solve rather than just taking the low-hanging fruit, solving the low-hanging fruit, and then going deeper as they need to. That was one of the experiences I've had. So next question I have is, didn't see a lot regarding data quality, and that was surprising. So if why do you think that is, especially if you think about AI and how important it's going to need to rely on data quality? So do you think that there's any reason for that, and that might just be an oversight by companies today, or not?
Yeah, I mean, well, you saw it as kind of there's a reason it's the number one improvement initiative, right? Data, data insights, and that is grounded in improving, master data management and quality of that data, right? So it is there. It's just maybe wasn't directly identified as a data quality issue, right? Look, this has been around forever, right? This isn't new, and the person who asked that question is absolutely right. With AI, inherently, you need better data and good data to be, to deliver, value. Look, the problem is, which is the same problem it's always been, right? Where do we get the data? Who manages the data? The people inputting the data don't really understand what the data is used for, so they don't really care if they put in good data or not. Data standardization is not there. To really solve this problem, right, you need you need a number of aspects, right? You need good data governance across the company. And you need third-party partners that, can support this, right? And then you need the tools to kind of manage this on an ongoing basis. You need the structure in place to kind of keep the data clean on an ongoing basis. I mean, you can clean it up once, but then it just gets outdated. You really need the tools, the governance, the people, the processes in place to kind of manage this as an overall master data governance approach and process, with data stewards from each of the different businesses and functions, supporting the objectives here. And that's tough. I mean, we do have some clients that have it, and it is a big focus right now, but it's a big problem to solve.
I'm really excited about this particular area. This is something that HICX is investing in this year, on top of what we already have, in particular around AI, generative AI, and being able to read data. I think AI is going to have a profound impact on being able to understand different types of data, to consolidate and merge that data. And then if you take that on top of the agents that exist, to your point about being able to continuously monitor that data, make suggestions for improvements, and or automatically make those improvements, I think there's going to be a profound impact. And we see this in 2026, at least in terms of what we're going to build and what we're hearing from our customers. Kurt, I think we're out of time. I thank you so much for talking today. I think insights were extremely valuable, and I think we're really excited for 2026. And hopefully you are too. Any parting thoughts from you?
No, I just appreciate the opportunity. Again, if anybody's got specific questions, you can link in with me on LinkedIn and we can set up some time to talk. But appreciate the opportunity, Jeremy. And I agree, 2026 should be an exciting year.
Great. Thank you, everyone. And if you have any further questions, don't feel free to reach out to HICX, and appreciate everyone for joining. Thank you.